Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 45 of ThROH The Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning. It's me, Trevor Dame. It's he, Matt Feuerstein, is back again. And Matt, I don't know if I mentioned this on the last show, but I think last month was our 3-year anniversary doing this show.
Yeah, it's been the greatest time of my life.
Only good things have happened in the last 3 years.
Yeah, being partnered with you has just made the world a better place. And as you can see, the world is a wonderful, wonderful place right now. Everything's going great. So, thank you. I like everything that's happening right now in the world. I hold you completely responsible for it. So thank you.
Definitely. Well, I feel the same about you because honestly, I've had plenty of happy moments too, but honestly, the last 3 years since I started doing this show have been, for reasons completely unrelated to the show, the worst 3 years of my entire life.
And it's all my fault.
So I don't know if we started this podcast on an old abandoned Indian burial ground or something, but it has just been one catastrophe, personal and otherwise, after another. But honestly, my life's fine right now, other than the incredible pandemic that is forcing us all to stay at home and lose jobs and be worried about each other and ourselves. But as far as that, I guess I'm doing as well as could be. I hope hope all of you out there are as well. And
the one silver lining is that we are around to do this much more quickly than usual.
Yes, in case you haven't, and definitely when I tweeted today that we were going to be recording, I got multiple people saying, oh, finally a silver line to the pandemic, which was both incredibly satisfying to hear and also way too much pressure. Oh boy, we get to justify a pandemic, man. We've got to be the whipped cream and cherry on top of this dog feces sundae that is the last month of world affairs.
Yeah, I guess it's flattering that we're changing people's lives for the better. Whoever these people are, I don't know, but good luck to them.
Some other things that are changing people's lives for the better podcast-wise are the other great shows on the podcast network we're on, the Pro Wrestling Only Podcast Network, easy enough for me to say. And I always plug new shows that I've just debuted on the network. And there's a new one from our mutual friend, Matt. Stephen Graham has Who's Next, which is a show devoted just to watching and talking about every Goldberg match from the beginning, almost like a Ring of Honor podcast, because truly we have invented doing things from the beginning. So obviously anyone that does that going forward, ripping us off. But no, it's going to be 2 episodes a week. It's a shorter podcast, obviously, much like Goldberg matches, which I think is refreshing. And I got permission to reveal that there's episodes that are already out, but I will be a guest on that show. I recorded 4 episodes with Steven in the last week. And
wow.
Those won't be coming out. It'll probably be a week or 2 at least before those come out, but you should start listening now. And I had a great time. So, yeah, I am on yet another podcast.
Wow. Well, I can't wait for that because Steven always has great ideas for podcasts, very creative. And I just can't get enough of hearing your voice, Trevor. So I cannot wait.
That makes one of us. Oh, and also, Matt, I want to show everyone how lazy I am. So when I was DMing Steven today to ask permission, could I, because some podcasts, they don't want to spoil guests or stuff before the podcast drops. So I said, can I bring up that, I'm going to be on the show in the future? And he said yes. And then he said, kind of half jokingly, but half seriously, do you know Joe Gagney's number? Haha. And I said, oh, I'll put in a good word with Joe because I have to talk to him soon to ask him to be on the next episode of ThROH The Years, except I realized the next episode is not in Boston. That's 2 episodes from now. So, Matt, here's how lazy I am and how much I don't want to talk to Joe. I am now not going to DM him. I'm just going to say, Joe, if you're listening and want to do Who's Next, it was a fun podcast. I enjoyed. Get in touch with Steven. That's how lazy I am.
Well, you're also putting him on the spot publicly. Joe, you better fucking do that show.
Incredible pressure. And if you want to listen to us with Joe Gagney, including, he's done lots of episodes of this show, but the show we talked about on the last episode of Through the Years, the 5-star match game WrestleMania Trivia Edition, has dropped. So if you want to listen to that, that's on the Voices of Wrestling podcast network, and Matt and me and Justin Shapiro. And it was a great show. And all I can say is I will not give away the winner, but what I can promise is that at least one of the two of us loses. So that doesn't spoil anything because it's a 3-person show with only one winner. So if you have a desire to hear at least one of us lose something, I guarantee at least one, if not both of us, lose that show.
Yeah, it's possible that we're all losers in the end. So
But
you should check out who loses. Tune in to find out who loses.
But yeah, so yeah, in case you haven't noticed, the podcast's coming a lot more frequently thanks to this pandemic. But that brings us to this. So yeah, a very short turnaround by modern standards for us. But we are back to review Death Before Dishonor 2, Part 2, which took place the day after the very last show. It took place July 24th, 2004, at the Frontier Fieldhouse in Chicago Ridge, Illinois, in front of a reported crowd of 525 people. So, Matt, I've kind of talked a couple details about this in the last couple shows because these 3 shows were kind of tied together in Ring of Honor's hopes for a certain attendance figure. But I've saved a bunch of Observer stories from the previous few weeks worth of issues around this time just for this, so we can kind of talk about all now. So I'll just read a few quotes from various observers in the last few weeks. The first one says, "The major test for Ring of Honor comes next month for shows July 17th in Elizabeth, New Jersey, July 23rd in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, outside Milwaukee, and July 24th in Chicago Ridge, Illinois. Gabe Sapolsky was hopeful of doing a combined 3,000 paid on those 3 shows." Then we go to another Observer issue. "Advances for this coming weekend in the Chicago and Milwaukee areas were below what they were hoping for. So the idea of drawing 3,000 fans between Elizabeth and the other 2 shows doesn't look like it'll happen." And very much that came to fruition because we'll jump to... Oh, wait, first, still another quote here. "Ring of Honor is looking at doing a midsummer peak of angles, hoping to draw a total of 3,000 fans at the 3 shows." And then we get to the next Observer. "Ring of Honor had what has to be a disappointing weekend at the gate, but did 2 very well-received shows. The July 24th show in Chicago Ridge, Illinois, drew about 525 fans, down from the 800 they did on the debut show in the market. From the company standpoint, they are blaming the smaller crowds on lack of promotion because of the business transition and the website being down for 2 weeks. But since the site was back up, the DVD sales, because they are more up-to-date with the shows than ever before, are doing better than ever. They were hoping for 3,000 paid out of the last 2 weeks of shows, and the number ended up being less than 1,700. And finally, we go to the Torch. Wade Keller wrote, "Ring of Honor officials are not sure what to make of the lower attendance figures from the events in Wisconsin and Chicago last weekend. Ring of Honor booker Gabe Sapolsky tells the Torch that he feels Ring of Honor's split from RF Video distracted them from properly promoting both events last weekend. We definitely fell short on the promoting end of things, and we have no one to blame but ourselves," he tells the Torch. "Our website was down for a couple of weeks right before the show, and our attention was focused on starting the new Ring of Honor rather than promoting these shows. Ring of Honor will get a better idea of the numbers they can expect in the Midwest when Ring of Honor returns in October for another double shot weekend in Dayton, Ohio, and Chicago Ridge, Illinois, as they will now be able to focus on promoting both events." So, Matt, that's they were hoping for 3,000, only getting 1,700. The thing that this jogged my memory, I do not remember this. I didn't know, for a company at this time, you have to remember Ring of Honor lived and died on just selling the DVDs, and they were split from RF Video. The idea that their website was down for 2 weeks, that's like a pretty major blow.
Yeah, I didn't remember that at all. And I mean, I don't know. I'd like to see confirmed. Like, was it fully down that entire time? Did you get a chance to look into that?
No, I didn't, unfortunately. And honestly, again, I do not remember. I do not remember this, but obviously that's something they were using as one of the reasons why maybe this double shot weekend did not draw as well. But yeah, I mean, for a company where I have to imagine a lot of the tickets are bought online, all the DVDs and clips were bought online, like
the tickets are either going to be bought online or they're going to be bought like in person at the previous show, right?
Yeah. So I mean,
that's terrible timing.
But I imagine, I guess they probably, I guess this, I mean, this was right around the time they really finally had the real means real official split from Rob Feinstein. So I guess that necessitated them having to do a whole new website from scratch, I guess, which is something else. But
What were the dates of these shows? July 17th and 18th?
July 17th, I believe, was Ring of Honor Reborn, the final stage.
So this is 20. This is the 24th and 25th.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So it does. The Wayback Machine does have snapshots from those dates, like around then. And it's, has a preview of Reborn completion, July 16th, Newswire. So it doesn't sound like they were 100% down. Maybe just not working as well.
All we know is that Chicago would continue to be a good market for Ring of Honor going forward, and that they wouldn't ever come back to Wisconsin. So, but obviously, I think the big difference there is, one, Chicago is just a better market, but two, even though 525 is drastically lower than the 800 they drew the first time, that's still over 500 was generally what I think Ring of Honor was aiming for at this point. So
yeah, ROH did eventually go back to Milwaukee, but it was in like a totally different era. Long after it was like, it was more like the Sinclair era when it was finally back there.
Yeah, I have to confess, I know not my knowledge of the Sinclair era is got more holes in it than Swiss cheese.
Oh yeah, me too, for sure. I just know I've like seen them having shows in Milwaukee, but like I don't know what was on those shows or anything like that.
Yeah. So that brings us to the first match on the show, Death Before Dishonor 2, Part 2, the Double Deuce. I guess we should mention, much like the last show, Gabe's continuing his idea for these Death Before Dishonor shows, that on these shows there is no backstage segments, no interviews, everything is done in the ring. So it's mostly just matches on these shows. And so we go right to the opening match on this DVD, and that would be Rocky Romero with Homicide, Julius Smokes, and Low Ki at his side, defeated Chad Collier via submission in 11 minutes 31 seconds using the cross arm breaker. Matt, this match was, I remember at the time, was hailed as a real like hidden gem, kind of like, wow, that's like a really surprisingly good match. How did you think it kind of held up, given, because I remember that's what people thought of it at the time, but how does it look? How's it, 15, 16 years now difference?
I would say it really got the crowd going. Like it had some of the best responses of the night, which makes sense for an opener. But they did a really good job of playing to what this crowd wanted to see. So in that sense, it was really good. I also liked, I really liked for a change that they just got right into the action. It's nice to see like the DVD opens with somebody entering for a match. You just don't get that very often in ROH. So up until this point, right? As far as the match itself, I thought that it was good. I did not think it was special good, but I thought they did a good job. The negative I would say is that I didn't think there was a ton of story to the match. I thought that Collier was like really just like feeling it, just in terms of like personality. He was really hamming it up. He was like, yelling and jawing with the Rottweilers and the ref, and his moves and stuff looked really good. I thought all the action was really good, and it was action packed. They were really going back and forth. They like Romero did some heel stuff by kicking Chad Collier instead of cleanly breaking, but then later he cleanly broke, so I guess he was getting more into like the wrestling aspect. They did this wacky roll-up series where then Rocky was flung out of the ring. At one point, Collier hit this really, really good drop kick, and then a brainbuster right after that, got two. He actually dominated for a while, Collier did. And the crowd really liked it when they were like trading their finishers, the armbar and the arm breaker and the cloverleaf. But then finally Romero did this like modified Rana into the armbar and got the tap out. I thought it was really good action. I didn't think it rose to any sort of special level because I didn't think there was much more to it than that. One commentary highlight, because the whole Rottweiler crew was at ringside. Gabe started by saying, what the Rottweilers did last night was absolutely disgusting. And I was like, oh yeah, they broke Allison Danger's neck with the cop killer. But no, he just said they disrespected the belt by spitting on it. So So yeah, that's really disgusting, I guess. But yeah, that's what I would say about the match. It was a good match. I do not think looking at it with 2020 eyes, it'd be something that I'll remember for very long.
I have a feeling like if the Rottweilers had done like a an angle where they had beaten down Allison Danger to the point that she was bleeding, and then the blood got on the Ring of Honor title, Gabe would be like, "Oh my God, can you believe what's going on? There's a drop of blood on the Ring of Honor title. Like, how dare they?" And he wouldn't mention
Yeah,
Allison Danger at all. But
they're disrespecting the business.
they're gonna have heat in the locker room now. But I completely agree with you about this match where I thought this was a good match, like a very enjoyable, if I had to put a star rating on, I'm getting less worried about putting star ratings on it. Not that I have to put them on everything, but like 3.25 star, 3.5 star-ish match. Like it's a fun match, but giving a little spoiler of my thoughts on the rest of the show, I think there are a lot of matches on the show that are this good. So in that sense, maybe not quite as good as my memory because it was like, there's a lot of matches on the show that reach this level in my opinion. But then again, maybe why people thought this is a hidden gem is because Chad Collier. I think he's one of the more underrated guys of this era. Rocky Romero wasn't really that well known to some fans yet, so maybe just the fact that like when Samoa Joe and Colt Cabana or somebody wrestles, you go, oh, I expect that to be a good match. But for a lot of fans, maybe at this time they were like, Rocky Romero and Chad Collier. I didn't expect those guys to have a match like this, but exactly what you said. I thought they like always kept things moving. It was a really good mix of a little bit of everything in terms of, everything they can do. And especially like Chad Collier here, I think shows off, like, again, he's not just a submission guy where, like you said, really showing off he has some really good charisma. Like, even at the start of the match, there's a moment where but I think before the match starts, he won't stop clapping, and then he goes to shake Romero's hand, but Romero refuses, and I think you can hear Collier say something like, "Come on, I wiped my ass, but I washed my hand." Like, it's just such a Chad Collier kind of thing.
Yeah, he gets underrated in terms of his personality for sure.
Yeah, and I think even his offense, like some people just looked at him and go, "Oh, he's like a Dean Malenko type." And yes, he was known for mat wrestling, but here he does a flying cross body. He does just a beautiful flying leg lariat. And like really on the last show, I talked about how he was underrated, but I thought that last show was a rare off night for him. Here, it's like he completely redeems himself. Everything he does looks really on point. Rocky Romero looks good too. Um, there's not much to say about his performance. It's just a good standard performance. Uh, there and the difference from what we would see a lot on this night. There's a lot of interference on the show. Even though the Rottweilers were at ringside, they did not interfere in this match. So it's a rare match where a stable doesn't actually interfere. And I guess maybe to put Rocky over a little bit more, he gets the completely clean when he doesn't completely dominant. And yeah, like you also said, the crowd being really into it. I was surprised how like late in the match when Chad Collier gets the Texas Cloverleaf on, the crowd really cheers, and they give this match like an extended round of applause after the match. So again, maybe for the time, maybe it's weird because, again, I don't think this match was that much better than a lot of matches on the show, but it definitely seemed like I remember at the time on the message boards, people were really raving about this match and the crowd was really into it. So maybe there's something on rewatch that I'm seeing that I'm not sure why it's not quite as good as I remember, but still.
Well, it makes sense. There are just some matches that play better at their time than they do later, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And that brings us to match 2. Alex Shelley, who came to the ring with Jack Evans and Roderick Strong, but not Austin Aries because he was preparing for his match. Shelley defeated Jimmy Jacobs via submission in 14:28 with the Border City stretch. And I would say this is another good match. Like, I would say I would put this like a little bit above the last match, another like kind of 3.5-star match. And one thing I liked watching this match is Shelley and Jacobs were at this point in their careers like a lot of indie wrestlers throughout history where they kind of come up in the same scene and they get tied together where they drive together to the shows. I don't know if they drove together on this show, but like a lot of times they'll kind of come as a package deal. Like we're if you get one of us, both of us will come together, and oftentimes they'll be asked to work together. So these guys have wrestled each other a ton in a whole bunch of promotions. And a lot of times when two guys are kind of paired together like that, I find their matches look a little rehearsed because they just know each other so well. And one thing I liked about this match was it felt organic, even though I'm sure these guys, knew each other very well. In fact, you can actually see them, like, if anything, there's a couple of moments where it's very clear you can see them calling spots to each other in the match. But I even then I appreciate, like, oh, they're really doing a lot of this on the fly, and they're not just going through, like, here's the 18 things we've really honed to, like, a mirror shine from working each other so often. And yeah, another match where it's just good action, maybe not the hugest, like a really in-depth story, but much like the last show, I've really am enjoying, just like appreciating just how good Jimmy Jacobs was as a babyface. He's one of those guys where his stature and his size and even just his appearance, like, there's something naturally sympathetic about him. And I feel it's kind of not that I didn't like later periods of Jimmy Jacobs, because I did, but I feel like he was kind of born to play the naturally sympathetic kind of literally baby-faced babyface. And he's one of those guys where just by nature of just how he wrestles and how he looks, like even a guy like Alex Shelley, who's just an average-sized wrestler, if that, comes off as more brutal and stronger, than he would probably against almost any other opponent. And I thought both guys looked good here, but I thought Jacobs just had so many cool little, like, I thought Shelley was good, but in the way we've come to know Shelley is good, where I felt like Jacobs pulled out so many cool little offensive touches. Like he did a spot where he did 4 or 5 consecutive cross arm neck breakers onto his knee. And I especially love after he did them all in a row, he like sold his own knee, like he had hurt himself doing them, which I thought was kind of a neat touch. He does this really cool bulldog where he basically leapfrogs over Shelley to get into it. And he even does some goofier comedy stuff that the crowd likes. Like he does a tomahawk chop from the top rope before he shouts, "I have the power," like He-Man or whatever. I think it's He-Man. I wasn't a big He-Man. I was more of a Transformers kid. But to me, Matt, the highlight of this match.
Well, also it's from the song, the Transformer. You have the touch, you have the power. So it might just be from that.
Oh, maybe, yeah. Crap. Huh. Maybe I wasn't as big a Transformers fan.
I get, but He-Man does say it too, for the record.
Cartoons in the 80s, they were all about who had the power.
They have the power, yeah.
But my favorite spot on the entire show, I just love this spot. Jimmy Jacobs in this match pulls out what might be the greatest senton I have ever seen, where he lands fully on Alex Shelley and does not touch the mat at all. Like he just the way I compared it, I tweeted a clip of this, was it's basically the Kyrie Sane insane elbow of sentons, where he just all his weight comes down. He looks like he's just putting everything into it. And usually when you see a senton, I guess the smart way to do it is you land mostly on the mat. You kind of hit with your shoulders or upper back, so the other guy doesn't really take much of it. And here, Jacobs just goes straight down, totally on Shelley. It just looks amazing. And yeah, the match itself, good, really a good, enjoyable match. I would say my only real criticism of it is I felt like the ending was a little abrupt, because it's like probably maybe less than a minute after that huge senton, Shelley's getting the win. He just grabs the Border City stretch like a few little moments later, and he just grabs it and it's over. And I felt like it was maybe a little abrupt going from Jacobs hitting moves that big to Shelley just kind of being like, okay, it's time for me to win. But other than that, I enjoyed this quite a bit. Matt, what did you think?
I enjoyed it. I think maybe slightly less than you, but not by much. I thought, Jacob's comeback was the highlight for sure. I think Shelley is so solid, so I don't want to say that like Jacobs was like the star of the match, because like he was able to be the star because Shelley was so good and solid for the whole thing. You know what I mean? Like doing the selling and playing the heel. But Jacobs was the personality that got over the most here. He started out with his stalling, with his, doing like almost like the rhythmic stomping for the husses, and the crowd was chanting for it. But and then it was a little bit slow. At one point early, Nolte was like, I've never seen so much hype for guys who have yet to win a title. And it's like, I don't know. I probably have. Um, Brock Lesnar got a lot of hype for a while before he won the title. I think he was the next big thing, I believe.
I would argue Tatanka got more hype.
Yeah, for sure.
Tatanka got a lot of push.
But so the match was slow at first, but it was building and building, and Jacobs was going for a lot of covers. I like that touch. It showed that he really wanted to beat Shelley. And I think you're right. I don't think this was like the standard Shelley Jacobs match that they knew, like the back of their hand. It seemed like they worked this match. They called it in the ring for a lot of it. Seemed like this might have been a different kind of match than they normally did together. And I appreciated that. But this is the second night in a row that Jimmy's comeback was just so good. And his selling was so good. And you're right, that senton got the big pop of the night. I also liked, Shelley's, going after Shelley's neck, dropping the knee, reversing the shell shock into the near fall. I like the Shelley blocking the contra code into that like cross-legged brainbuster. I'm not totally sure what crossing a guy's leg does to make a brainbuster more devastating, but it certainly made it look different, and that's cool. You know what? It's wrestling. What the fuck? But no, I thought it was a very good match. I would put it pretty close to on par with the previous match. But I know that I've seen these two have even better matches. So maybe that's what I was comparing it to. That's why I maybe didn't like it quite as much as you. But I thought it was a really, solidly good match.
Yeah, the way I would put it maybe is this isn't the kind of this isn't the match that's on the level that would put these guys like on the map, but it would put them in like the Atlas, I guess. Or what's less than a map? Like it put it on the drawing of the neighborhood you'd give to like a relative that's coming to visit you for the first time and they don't know where you live. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, or let's put it this way: it didn't put them on the map because they were already on the map, but it kept them firmly entrenched in the map.
Yes, kept them in the map. That's a great way to put it.
They were not wiped off the map from this.
One thing I do want to mention is Gabe says on commentary during this match, low-key cut a promo after the last match that we're absolutely not going to put on this home release. It was absolutely disgusting.
Oh, yeah.
And I tried in vain to find out what this promo could have been, but I don't think any of the – I think I read 3 different live reports for the show, and no one mentioned it. Although I will say that the live reports I found, I think they were all on PW Insider. There was a couple live reports, let me tell you, if you look them up for this show, they were doozies where, like, you gotta appreciate when anyone takes the trouble to make live reports, but I think at least 2 of them were like, yeah, I don't remember the finish for this match. I don't remember who won this match. And then there was one guy who says, I still don't get why Samoa Joe is the Ring of Honor champion. And I was like, okay, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I just was thinking, like, at this point in Ring of Honor, like, you're still not sold on Samoa Joe? Like,
that's weird.
Yeah, it was just funny, but no.
Yeah, but you know what I think? I think that Gabe was just trying to like reference the promo from the week before and like playing that up. But like that's what I think. Also, he makes another comment about that stricken from the record promo later, which I think is very funny. But I'll wait to get to that.
Yeah, maybe I misheard, or maybe he just kind of missaid something. Maybe he really was just when he says the last show, or
no, he was talking about this show, but I think he was lying maybe I'm wrong, but I think he was sort of like playing up the controversy that the previous show's promo had by acting like he always has promos that are cut off the show.
Because for those who don't remember or don't know, just 2 shows ago, that Ring of Honor Reborn completion, that was Low-key really did do a promo where they didn't cut it out. They actually just muted the audio where he did a line about Rob Feinstein being a boy toucher, quote unquote. And yeah, they didn't cut that out. They just muted it. But, so yeah, they're definitely playing that. It feels like they're playing that up. Ooh, the controversial aspect. So after the Shelley Jacobs match, Shelley gets on the mic. He says he and Jimmy have wrestled each other a lot of times, but goddamn if that match wasn't one of the toughest. He then says he's carried Jacobs like a backpack, though, and Jimmy has always been a thorn in Shelley's side and in his shadow. Shelley then says they're going to put Jacobs out of his misery, and Strong, Evans, and Shelley then beat down Jacobs until Ricky Steamboat comes out in jeans and a wife beater. I just wrote in my notes, Street Steamboat in all capital letters. Steamboat gets a big fuck 'em up Steamboat chant. Ricky stares down all of Generation Next except for Aries, who still isn't out there. Ricky gets on the mic and he says the only reason Generation Next is able to get the best of people is because they always outnumber them. Steamboat then says some line to Jack Evans that gets a laugh I couldn't hear. Did you make out what it was? There's a lot of stuff on the house mic on this night that I could not understand.
Yeah, I don't know what he said.
And it's unfortunate because it did get a big laugh from the crowd.
I think he might have said "You're white" because there was a "You are white" chant during the next match at Jack Evans.
Yeah. Steamboat then says he's got two guys waiting behind the curtain to even the odds, and John Walters and Matt Striker hit the ring, and the bell rings, which brings us to our next match, completely impromptu. Generation Next of Jack Evans and Roderick Strong defeated John Walters and Matt Striker in 10 minutes, 40 seconds when Strong pinned Walters after hitting a spinal shock. So, Matt, another early Jack Evans Roderick Strong tag match for us. What do you think about this one?
I always like these matches with Strong and Evans. I thought the ending was a little bit convoluted, but I thought that but I'll get to that. But I thought the match was good. I like, they were still coming up. Strong and Evans were with new double teams. Like, Strong had Evans in a wheelbarrow position and then flipped him over onto Walters, which I thought was cool. I like the hot start. It felt ECW-esque, like a impromptu match. They're going at it hot. That got the crowd going pretty good. Usually when that happens, usually works well with the crowd when they don't overdo it. Another annoying Nolte line. You could see that Nolte is the opposite of growing on me. Gabe rhetorically goes, "Does anyone chop harder than Roderick Strong?" And Nolte, completely unironically, is like, "Samoa Joe." And it's like, oh, what a fucking asshole. Why would you do that? I'm sorry. Nolte's, I'm sure, a good guy. But that was annoying. Evans, he does a lot of cool moves. The cartwheel elbow on Walters in the corner, but he flies all the way to the floor. Strong starts going after Walters' back with kicks and the surfboard, but he doesn't pull him all the way over. He just kind of keeps Walters upright. And then Walters comes back with double lung blower to Strong and Evans. And then hot tag Striker. Have you noticed that Striker seems more motivated in these Generation Next matches than he had in a while?
I think so. I think maybe it's because he's kind of wrestling like he's angry at them, which actually I think Matt Striker, who wrestles like he's a little bit pissed off, is better than Matt Striker, who's just doing kind of like a classic technical wrestling match, quote unquote.
I think that's fair. He does a pretty good House of Fire sequence until he misses a Cabana. And then Generation Next hits the Ode to the Bulldogs move that they debuted at the previous week. The crowd actually chanted, "Let's go Striker," which, come on, that's a pretty big turnaround from a few weeks earlier. And Steamboat actually chopped Strong on the outside, and Walters and Striker hit a Doomsday Rana on Evans, which is, that's what I wrote. It can't be true. Did they do a Doomsday Rana? That can't be right. The Doomsday Lung Blower. That's what they did. I knew I wrote that wrong. Yeah, I was like, there's no way they did that.
That Striker really changing up near the end of his ring of career.
So Walters got in Evans as in that same wacky submission as night one, and Striker got Strong in the Striker lock. Shelley distract the ref, so he missed the tap out. Then Steamboat chased Shelley all around the ring, and Shelley runs in and breaks up the Striker lock. Then Aries attacks Steamboat in the aisle. Then Walters continues to have Evans in that submission this entire time. That's the part that I thought was convoluted. Strong comes off with a top rope elbow on Walters, and Nolte calls it an elbow leg drop combination. But there was no leg drop. I rewound it. It was just an elbow. I don't know how I don't understand. But the brawl continued in the aisle, and then Strong did the what did he do? I wrote spinal shot, but I don't know.
Spinal shock was the finish.
Yeah,
I believe.
Yeah. Okay. Well, he did that, and then he pinned Walters. While Evans stopped Striker, the thing that I thought was convoluted was just that Walters had Evans in this submission hold for a really, really, really long time while all this other stuff was going on until Strong hit the quote elbow drop, leg drop combination. that supposedly happened. But I did like that Strong won with a move that you don't normally see from him finishing matches, that Spinal Shock. Um, I thought it was a good action-packed match. I just didn't love the finish.
I think the show is 3 for 3 for me so far on like all being right around that 3.5 star, 3.25 star range, because I thought this was on that level. And it's weird. I came away from this match thinking that maybe the best use of Stryker and Walters at this point in their careers might have been as a tag team, because I really liked the hot tag they had on the prior show when they were in a 6 man. And I thought this was like, I agree with you. Like, this is the best Strikers looked in a while. And again, I really do think it's just more. It seems like when they in these 2 tag matches, like both guys are wrestling with like a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, maybe just because they know they're supposed to be wrestling like, oh, we're pissed off at Generation Next. Maybe it's that Steamboat is there. Even they're just trying to impress like a legend that's at ringside. Because I know a lot of the wrestlers talked about how much they loved like being able to talk to Steamboat and get some tips from him and things like that. But I just thought their offense looked really good here. And it's one of those sad things. It's sort of like the Xavier run, where it's always sad when you know a guy's he's on his way out of the company and then he starts doing some better performances where you're like Matt Striker's back to being kind of good again. And you know he's not long for this world, which is kind of a sad part. But I thought what made this match good was it was kind of like just a continuation of the Generation Next 6 man from the last show, except they took away one member off each team, where so much of this match was just about showcasing really cool Generation Next offense and giving them a bunch of the match. Like, I thought Roderick Strong, he's showing a little bit more of himself in every match. Like, you can even hear Gabe really starting to put over how hard his chops are. Like, he's really trying to put over, he's the strong man of the group, no pun intended. And I was going to point it out if you didn't, that line from Nolte, like, I think that line where where Gabe wonders who chops harder than Strong, asking a rhetorical question, and Nolte has to come up with a serious answer. I think that perfectly encapsulates Mark Nolte, where my biggest complaint with Mark Nolte, he's not the worst commentator ever.
No, no, not at all. I mean, come on. We've done ROH shows. We know that there are way worse commentators than him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think his biggest problem is he points out things that don't have to be pointed out and detract from matches. Like, he will frequently, and I think I've got examples later, he will frequently call attention to things that a better commentator would just not mention, would go, well, I don't need to mention that. And Mark Nolte will be like, hey, look at that, everybody. And it's just like, and something like that, like anyone that's rational would just know that when Gabe says, who chops harder than Roderick Strong, or is there anyone who does? He's saying a rhetorical question. He's trying to put over Roderick Strong. He's trying to give him some identity. And it is not a serious question, Mark, that needs you to contemplate and give a serious answer like, actually, Gabe, I think Toshiaki Kawada hit pretty. Like, no, Mark, just please be quiet, please. But
also, he's probably like old school. Like, he's putting over the champion, and that makes the title mean more, and that's really the most important thing. That's maybe what he was thinking there.
But just a lot of really good offense from Strong Evans. Like you mentioned, Jack Evans does that great handspring elbow where like the momentum carries him over the top to the floor, which sounds kind of stupid, but when you watch the way Evans does it, it looks completely like, oh, that makes sense that he'd fall after doing it like that. There's a great move where Strong has I think John Walters bent over backwards, and he calls Evans in the ring, and Evans hits like a drop kick to Walter's midsection while he's being bent backwards, and he makes good contact with it, and it looked really cool. And Strong is just pulling out more of that offense. He's doing like kind of a proto version of the big sick kick, like the running 1-foot drop kick, doing the chops, the big delayed vertical suplex. My problems with this match would be a couple things. Again, good match, but if I'm going over my problems, there's a sequence where Jack Evans is kind of in control of the match, and some of it looks good, like when Jack Evans does a fisherman buster. I go, okay, I can buy that. But there's moments where he is like throwing forearms, and he does a really ugly looking gourd buster where the guy takes the bump totally on his knees, where even commentary points it out, and it's like, I don't think Jack Evans lends himself naturally to being kind of like the guy controlling a bigger guy with that kind of offense for a stretch. And like you said, I think the bigger problem in this match though was the end. You zeroed in on the submission being on for so long. I just thought it was too much stuff going on at once with the brawl on the outside, and I especially didn't like, and this would become a pattern throughout the night. Alex Shelley just runs in the ring in full view of the ref and interferes in the match, and the ref does nothing about it. And it's I guess I'll talk about more later because there's a different spot in a different match that really brings this point home. But definitely a lot of really poorly done interference in Ring of Honor in this era. And I guess if I have one other little complaint, it's for the second straight. I don't know if it's the second straight match, but we saw, I think, at Reborn Completion, uh, Strong and Evans do the great kind of ode to the Bulldogs, the spot where Evans does where Strong gets the guy up in like a torture rack and Evans does a moonsault off the guy onto the other opponent. And it's such a great crowd-pleasing spot. Both matches they've done it in Ring of Honor so far, it gets the biggest pop of the match. And both times it's not the finish. Like, to me, that's a very kind of rookie mistake. Like, if you win matches, that should be what you win with, because that's clearly the coolest thing you've got. But
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how many matches they won with that move. Only a few, I think.
yeah, it's weird. I don't know why. Like, to me, that's something I would learn like after the very first night. Like, you do that spot and it gets such a huge pop. I would just go to the back and go, well, that's what we're ending matches with. Like, that's clearly the best thing we do in terms of just wowing the crowd. But both times it's just like a middle of the match spot, which is weird. But yeah, that's about it. So we're 3 for 3, and that brings us to the fourth match, a 6-man mayhem match, which is just one of their kind of singles scrambles. It's Trent Acid defeated Danny Daniels, Delirious, Matt Sydal, Sean Daivari, and the Great Kazushi in 8:45 when he pinned Daivari after hitting his inverted brainbuster finisher. This is continuing the kind of mini storyline we're on this weekend. Trent Acid proclaimed himself king of the multi-man matches, and so he's going to win both of them this weekend and go on to a title shot. For those who don't know, the Greek Kazushi would be Kazushi Miyamoto, who had previously wrestled, and he was an All Japan wrestler. He previously wrestled for Ring of Honor at the big All Japan versus Ring of Honor Final Battle 2004 show. And Gabe points this out. And another annoying Mark Nolte thing, I would say about a minute to 2 minutes after Gabe points this out on commentary, Nolte goes, I wonder why Kazushi's parents were thinking what they were thinking when they gave him the first name Great. And it was like, Gabe literally said a minute or two before that, he's really Kazushi Miyamoto. He already wrestled in Ring of Honor at Final Battle 2003, but whatever. As a match, I thought this was just your standard kind of short ROH undercard spot fest where after a minute or two of a couple guys pairing off, it just goes to everyone running in the ring, doing every crazy spot they can think of. There's a lot of sloppiness, but it's exciting. So it's the typical, above average as a match, I would think, because I think if you go into these matches just expecting a lot of crazy spots and some sloppiness, you're always going to be satisfied with these. They usually don't rise above that level, and they're usually not below that level. I thought everyone got a moment, except I would say, in a weird way, I felt like Trent Acid, who won the match, was kind of like the least impressive. Not even least impressive, just he was the least showcased in this match. He spent a lot of the match just brawling on the outside, and maybe that was because they had under 9 minutes for 6 guys, and since Acid knew he was winning, maybe he felt like he could take more of a backseat. But I felt like Delirious got a lot more spotlight in this match. Danny Daniels got a lot more spotlight in this match. Matt Sydal got to do a couple really cool flying moves like he always does, including a springboard Dragon Rana. The Great Kazushi is basically Kazushi Miyamoto doing the Great Muta gimmick, and he just spits mist a couple times, so at least that's memorable. And he also does a thing where there's a spot where he and Daivari are going for I guess, a roll-up, and the Great Kazushi takes a header into the mat. It just looked.
I called it a roll-up driver.
Yeah, it is insane. Yeah, just that's the great way to put it. Like, imagine if someone was trying to roll you up, or you were trying to roll someone up, and you didn't tuck your head enough, and you just instead like rolled your head like head first into the mat. just brutal looking. And yeah, I'm sure you could name off some of the crazy spots, but just kind of a standard 6-man, good enough for what it was. Do you disagree, or do you have any other thoughts on?
The only thing that I would add that you didn't say is I thought Davari actually was one of the standout performers in the match. He had a lot of big spots. Also, Delirious, Gabe keeps talking about how he has a lizard face to get to the point where I'm thinking, like, is he in the Illuminati? Do you think he's in the because he's a lizard? But
Even Nolte during this match is like, why are you so obsessed with that? Like, even Nolte is just fed up with it.
yeah. One spot I like from Davari is like Acid was going for an acai moonsault, but Davari just like grabbed him, threw him down to the floor, and just rammed him into the guardrail, which I don't know if I've ever seen before. I thought was a really cool reversal to like somebody going for an acai moonsault. I liked that Kazushi at the beginning did red mist, and then at the end did green mist. I thought that was kind of fun. I don't know if I don't know. I just thought that was cute. Definitely sloppy. At one point, Nolte, I didn't even mind him saying this, was like, I think I've seen more moves miss than I've seen hit, which is true. Like, not only like the botches, but also they just like reversed everything. Like they didn't actually like do all their moves. Another thing that I always find enjoyable about these matches is at the beginning when everyone like they just like it's like a handshake party. Like you got 6 people all having to shake 5 other people's hands. Like it's just like so many handshakes. And I feel like man, the code of honor could just never work anymore because
I was about to say,
social
was
distancing.
Weird seeing that many handshakes in 2020.
Yeah, very very weird. Also another fun part. Oh, another not sanitary part in the era of coronavirus. Kazushi. Wow, I wrote Kazushi. He does the miss, and then Davari just spits his gum at him. And then Gabe says, "Do you remember this part?" He goes, "You're going to see total nonstop action." Excuse me, I didn't mean that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. He felt so weird after he said total nonstop action.
And to be clear, I think judging from listening to it, like Gabe really didn't mean to make that pun, and it's like he really like catches himself like oh shit.
Yeah, he definitely did not mean to. But I think one of the big standout spots for Davari was doing a double Death Valley driver on Delirious and Seidel. The crowd really loved that spot. I liked it a lot too. And he went for the double pin, but that's when Acid grabbed him and hit like a reverse vertical suplex, I guess sort of like a curtain call for the pin. Action-packed, messy as usual. I would say it was like you said, a pretty typical 6-man scramble.
And I think that's a good point you mentioned about Sean Daivari. I should have mentioned that, I believe when he did that double Death Valley driver, that was one of the standout spots, I think, from the match that the crowd really loved. And I did think in that opening, there's a thing in that opening sequence where Kazushi does the misspit, and before Daivari does the gum, I like the great Kazushi's like, I'm going to do every hand gesture possible. So this is what he does. He, at the opening sequence where he stands off with Daivari, he spits mist, he does a throat slash, he does a double thumbs down, and then he does a double middle finger. Like it's like he's like, I'm gonna do. I can't speak in the language of English. I'm gonna speak with the language of hand gestures, and he does them all. So I thought
the only thing that I wish he did the old Italian like flip up on the chin kind of thing. You know what I'm talking about?
I would have loved it. Yeah, if he just added another 4, like he could have just kept him coming, and I would have been happy. But so. Not much more to say.
Yeah. The FBI move that they all did that, right? Like the little Guido and stuff he used to do, and he used to do like the flip up on the chin.
Yeah.
And Tony Mama Luke. Anyway.
And that brings us to the Ring of Honor Pure title match. Doug Williams successfully defends the title again. He defeats Austin Aries via submission in 14 minutes, 13 seconds with an armbar while Aries is actually in the ropes. He's exhausted his 3 rope breaks, so he can just do it while Aries is in the ropes. Matt, this is a kind of a pretty big match in terms of name value. It's like, whoa, it was weird watching the show. It's kind of, I guess because Ring of Honor's got so much depth by this point, you're like, wow, like Doug Williams and Austin Aries just in the middle of the card. Okay, like how good did you think this was?
I was a little disappointed by it. Like I thought that they They definitely held back, which is fine. It was their first meeting. It was a good match. Williams didn't do a lot of the stuff that I like from him. A lot of like the wacky chain wrestling stuff. It was a little bit of a slower pace. Aries certainly was slower. They were really going into the whole rope breaks thing, which makes sense. It was still early. Like they traded hammerlocks early until Aries eventually went to the ropes, and Mark Nolte made fun of him for using his first rope break on a hammerlock, and Gabe was just like, well, maybe it was habit, which makes sense, right? Um,
Hmm.
and Aries kept sneaking closed fists, like I kind of like that, and then Williams would hit him back and lose a rope break. Like Aries would do the closed fist, the ref wouldn't see it. So Williams would hit him back, and the ref would see it. Very schoolyard stuff. The announcers note that Generation Next is not in Aries' corner, and that they weren't in Shelley's corner the night before for it. So I guess the gimmick is that they take title matches with more respect. I guess that's the idea.
Yeah.
Nolte actually criticizes the rules. I imagine Gabe was probably pretty pissed about this. He was like, hitting someone in the face twice gets a penalty, but choking on the ropes doesn't. So Gabe was probably like, "Shut up! Why are you doing that?" But because this is like Gabe's pet project right now is this
Yeah.
pure title thing. Um, so Aries was working on Doug's back with knees and chin locks with knees, and but he's more selling his neck than his back for whatever reason. Um, but Aries, he goes for a Muda lock until Doug uses his second rope break. Then Aries does a corkscrew screw dive onto Doug on the floor instead of his usual like missile tope thing. So Doug rams Aries' shoulder on the post, and they tease both guys getting counted out, but they get back in at 19. I guess trying to get the count out part of it over, which they haven't really gone too much yet, because normal ROH matches do not have countouts. So Doug is much more hard hitting here. He does the knee lift for 2. He goes to clothesline Aries, to Doug, but Doug knees him in the arm. He does the bomb scare to the shoulder and does a bridging hammerlock, and Aries uses his second rope break. Then Aries misses a spinning elbow, but gets hit by a big running forearm for 2. Doug gets a Rings of Saturn, which it's funny because Aries does that move too, type move, and he uses his final rope break. And then Aries holds on to the rope for a minute, trying to spare his injured shoulder. So I like that. Like the rope breaks were gone, so he's just like clinging. But Williams goes up to the top and drops to the mat, pulling Aries' arm down with him. And then Williams stops Aries' 450 attempt and puts him in an arm hold on the rope, and Aries taps out. I thought everything was good about the match technically, but I just didn't find it had a lot of energy. So I think they saved a lot for a potential rematch, which I'm not sure if they ever had one.
I think I like this match a little bit more than you, although again, I would put this right at basically at the rating I've been giving everything except maybe I think the one match that's a little bit lower than everything else so far would be the 6-way, just because it was shorter and sloppy, but that was fun for what it was. But I do agree though that when you watch this match, it's definitely not the match. I think you watch it and know that if these two were told to go out in a main event and have a 20-minute match, they would do a lot differently and a lot better. I don't know how much of this match is just that they're wrestling for the first time, and how much of it is them holding back, and how much of it is maybe the pure rules, because I do think the pure rules slowed this match down a little bit, because even though you do still get, you still get a good amount of action, you get those big little bursts of Austin Aries' explosive offense. A lot of this match was focused on putting each other in submissions to try and get your opponent to use up a rope break. So I feel like that naturally just kind of slowed the match down a little bit. And yeah, they didn't go maybe as crazy or as big at the end as you would see in, I think, if they had done a main event. But I actually enjoyed this match a fair bit. I wrote in my notes that there was more knee porn in this match than the Victorian underground during Puritan times. I think I was trying a little too hard in my notes there, but Austin Aries hits this great like knee drop to Williams that looks like he's just crushing his face, and then Williams grabs Aries later and he does has him in the cravat, and he does the knee lifts to his head while he's holding the cravat, which I always think is a cool spot. And Williams does his usual great high knee lift, and Williams does the bomb scare which is the top rope knee drop, like you mentioned. So if you like knee offense, this is the match for you. Um, Also going to, and I do think what was cool about this match, and you mentioned it, was I think this is the first pure title match where they really use all three of the rules, because the three main rules of the pure title that differentiates it from regular matches is they have a count out. There's a 20 count on the floor. They the three rope breaks, and no punches allowed. And I feel like a lot of pure matches before this and a lot going afterwards only really focus on the rope breaks, and some focus on some of the other stuff. But I felt like this was the first time where they had Williams actually lose a rope break because he threw punches twice. And like you mentioned, Aries kind of tricks him where before the match, when the ref is turning to the timekeeper to start the match, Aries cheap shots Williams with a punch. And so when Williams throws a punch back, that's the only one the ref sees, and he gets a warning. And then later, there's a moment where Aries tricks him again. But the thing I didn't like about that spot, which I thought was kind of weird, was it looked like, at least from the camera angle we saw, that Williams really was, like, Aries has Williams in a headlock. And it really looked like Williams was actually pulling Austin Aries' hair. And then when the ref would always check, that's when Aries would throw punches. And then eventually Williams gets so pissed he throws a punch back and gets caught and loses the rope break. But it was like, it did look like you were cheating, Williams, like you were pulling his hair. So it kind of took away a little bit of the sympathy. And then later you do get that, the 20 count on the floor, which is the first time we really got one of those in a pure title match, I think. And they both go to 19 brawling on the floor and then roll in the ring at the same time. And it's one of those spots that sounds boring on paper, but if you've watched every Ring of Honor show, because they've never done that, it is a little bit of a novelty. And I think if I was watching this match live as a regular there, like I would have maybe even bought it, or at least thought maybe they would do a double count just to switch. And yeah, the one other thing I got to mention is, like you said, Mark Nolte in this match, he points out multiple times in the match, he's like, Gabe, well, it's not Gabe, it's Jimmy Bauer, but he's like, Jimmy, if punches are rope breaks, why isn't Aries getting a rope break taken away for like choking Williams on the ropes or stuff? And he keeps bringing that up. And again, it goes back to my central point with Mark Nolte, which is he's pointing out things that's making everybody look bad. Like, you don't need to point that out, because then it makes you sit down and think, well, yeah, why are the rules so arbitrary? Like, why can someone go to the eyes and it doesn't cost them a rope break, but if you throw a punch, it does cost you a rope break, even though they're both illegal? And yeah, like you said, like you can tell Gabe's probably just in his head probably thinking like, dude, just shut up. Like, you don't need to bring that up.
Exactly.
But it's something Nolte just has a habit with, where he's treating everything almost like it's a shoot, when your job is, again, to hide the negatives and focus on the positives. And
right, you're a salesman and a storyteller, basically, when you're a wrestling announcer. You're not there to like pick every strategy apart.
Yeah. So, but otherwise, good match. And again, I think some people, like, I think if you come into this match and you think, oh, I'm going to see Doug Williams versus Austin Aries, you're going to be disappointed unless you also know that it's just kind of the mid-card version of that match. If you come with that expectation, then I don't think you'll be disappointed, because it is a good match. I just think, yeah, if you're coming in thinking it's the best version of what these two could do, yeah, you're not getting that.
Yes, that's true. Accepting that this is what they were going for, they did a good job with it.
And that brings us to the match this is the match I was disappointed in, Matt. And that's Low Ki, who comes to the ring with Homicide, Julius Smokes, and Rocky Romero. And he defeats Mark Briscoe via submission in 16 minutes, 49 seconds with the Dragon Clutch. Now, first let me say, I think this match is good. I think every match on the show, other than, the six, well, even the six, I'd say everything's been 3 stars or better, but nothing's been like 4 stars. Everything's been in that range. And I think this would be, like, for me, in the low 3-star range too. But that's really disappointing for me, because Low Ki and Mark Briscoe as wrestlers, I love them. Maybe not as people, but as wrestlers, I have all the time in the world for both of these guys. And I think these two guys, naturally, you would think on paper, they would go great together, because Mark Briscoe really good at taking a beating, at selling, probably because he's the younger Briscoe brother. He's already at this point in his career, probably has just a million matches of experience of, being the face in peril for Jay. So he's really good at taking a beating and low key great at giving a beating, great at being the guy in control and kicking ass. And in this match, both guys do a lot of what they're great at and do it well. Like low key, he really beats down Mark, and a lot of it's kind of methodical, where he's just smacking him around in the corners. That's maybe could be a little more exciting, but he also does like his great top rope double stomp. He has a moment where Mark is just sitting in the corner, and he kicks Mark in the chest so hard, it's just brutal. And he does a lot of that, and Mark does a lot of good selling. Like I felt like there's a few moments in this match where Mark's getting beat up, and you can see his facial expression getting progressively more angry, which I think was a nice touch. I think he does a lot of these little Ricky Steamboat style mini comebacks where he'll fire up and land one or two moves, but Loki will quickly cut him off. And his selling is really good. Like there's a moment where in one of these mini comebacks, he's like throwing punches and he like wobbles while he's on offense and then falls on his ass. And I thought it was just neat little touches like that. But yet, the match just doesn't come together. It's like they had all the ingredients to make something really good and they never cooked it. Like, because you keep
love your food analogies.
Yeah, this is another Trevor Dame Wrestling food analogy. It's like they had all the ingredients to make a strawberry shortcake, and instead they just served you strawberries and whipped cream, which is still good, but it's not nearly what they could have made. And here, the majority of this match is low-key just beating the crap out of Mark Briscoe. And you think, oh, great, it's going to build to this really big moment where Mark Briscoe makes a comeback, and then there's going to be like a lot of big near falls, and it's going to be great. And I would say the comeback Mark Briscoe eventually gets, it's not worth how kind of long the low-key beatdown was. And I don't know why it's not I can't quite put my finger on why his comeback isn't as satisfying. I was thinking maybe it's because Mark makes so many mini comebacks that when he has his final big one, you don't really completely buy into it. Maybe it's because his comeback, maybe it's just the moves aren't big enough. Maybe I don't know why, but it just it doesn't work. And then the end from there, it's like it felt like they were halfway to a great match and they never go the second half of the way. And it's especially disappointing, Matt, I would say, not just because I really like these guys, but because the crowd is super into this, at least at first. Like at the start of this match, there is a shockingly loud like split crowd, like a legit split crowd where half of them are chanting for Mark and half are cheering for Low Key. And it goes on for like a good 30 seconds or more while they're just staring at each other, to the point I was like, wow, I didn't realize people were this excited for Mark Briscoe versus Low Key. And I feel like they had the crowd like were already ready for a great match. Like they could have, this could have been really special and it wasn't. And it was just fairly good. But maybe I'm being too hard on it. I don't know. Am I wrong there?
No, I agree with everything you said. But I think I know the reason. It's because Low-Key was trying to have that. He wanted to get over as a heel. So he was being much more methodical. He wasn't giving the crowd everything they wanted in terms of his like pacing, in terms of the moves that he was doing. He was stalling. He was kind of, like jawing with the crowd, right? The Rottweilers were interfering a little bit. He was going out of his way to actually work like a heel. And that made the match less than what you would expect. He wasn't at the point yet where he had the heel shtick so down that he could be this character while also having these great matches. And he had really good matches, but not like the level that you'd expect from Low-Key, because he was still trying to take the crowd down a few notches, if that makes sense. And I think it worked. Like, he played possum about a hurt leg and then shoved the ref and did a springboard back kick. Like, that was a really cool spot, but it was slow. It wasn't like this like suddenness that you would get from like the best Low-Key matches before, if that makes sense. He was doing his double stomp, but it wasn't like, later on he would get to do those double stomps completely out of the blue, fast pace, and the crowd already bought him as a heel. This was him getting himself over as a heel, I think. The stuff that drove me nuts about the match, actually, it was partly during the match, but partly also in the at post match. Where was Jay? Like, I mean, it's especially in the post match, but there was all this interference going on, and Jay was just nowhere to be found, and he wasn't hurt or anything. Another thing I thought was funny, Gabe at one point goes, the Briscoes, they like to drink and they like to fight. And I was like, I'm pretty sure Mark is still underage at this point. I think he's only 20 years old, but maybe not even. But besides that, yeah, I think low key did this by design.
I actually think that's a really good point that I didn't think of, and yeah, I did not. I failed to mention, so thank God you did. That this is probably the most healer. I mean, Loki's only wrestled 2 matches as a heel in Ring of Honor at this point, but yeah, he does a lot of heel stuff there. Like you said, he plays possum where he fakes a knee injury and he tosses the ref into Mark. He tells a fan to shut up. He grabs a chair at one point. He goes to the eyes. He does a ton of heel stuff. And one thing I really liked about Loki here, there actually was a moment where, much like the match on the previous night, the tag match against Moff and Whitmer, where he does a sequence with Moff where he lets Moff completely get the best of him, and then he kind of looks almost scared of Moff for a second. There's a moment early in this match where he gets on his hands and knees in like a grappling stance, and it basically tells Mark, like, let's mat wrestle. And he lets Mark completely get the best of him, and then again, he does that kind of like heelish, oh shit, like you completely beat me, I don't want to do that again. And I feel like sometimes people say, oh, Loki, Loki has a reputation for being very stubborn, but I do think if you watch a match like this, like you said, he's definitely doing things he would not do as a face, like a lot of things.
Yeah, it seems like if you know Loki personally, you might know more the ins and outs of the ways that he could be difficult. But from a fan perspective, he doesn't seem completely unwilling to do business like some guys are.
Yeah, even as a face, he sells. But yeah, I think some people who maybe just hear about Loki's reputation would be surprised to see him do spots like that where he completely shows ass as a heel, where he's like, yeah, that guy definitely got the best of me. He was willing, at least on this double shot, like to do that. He still wrestled, I would say, like 80% like the Loki as a face, but 20% was a bunch of heel spots now.
Right, and the pace was very different.
Yeah. One thing I also noticed, Matt, I don't know if you noticed this during this match, and it came up a few times during the show, is for some reason the audio on the mix on this show was completely off. Like whenever the crowd got really super loud, it's like it overtook the commentary volume. Like there was a few times during the show where I couldn't really make out commentary because like the crowd would be chanting very loud, and it was weird. Usually on Ring of Honor shows, I don't have that problem, and this show, again, just one of those weird technical things. Also, there was a moment in this match where it was low-key took a header into the mat. Like he hits forehead first on like some exchange, like the Great Kazushi did. And I don't know if there was a forehead magnet in under the canvas or something, because usually you don't see one guy in a wrestling show have that happen to them. And 2 guys on this show like took a header right into the mat that looked. This one wasn't as bad as the Great Kazushi, but
Forehead magnet. That sounds like, remember how Conan O'Brien used to have like those satellite channel skits where it's like, this is this is the fart all day channel, and it would just be somebody farting all day, something like that. And so like to be the forehead magnet channel where everyone would keep bumping their heads because of a forehead magnet.
or like there was that head on, whatever that, I don't even know what that product was supposed to be, but all
it was a headache thing, head on, applied
it was
directly
like
to
a
the
topical
forehead.
headache thing,
Yeah,
something like that.
doesn't.
That's
Yeah,
so bizarre to me.
I never tried it. Cannot vouch for its efficacy or lack thereof.
So the one thing though another thing that did bug me about this match, Matt, and I think it ties back into what we saw earlier, was interference leads to the finish here, like Smokes and everyone interferes. And the thing that really bugged me about this was Ring of Honor at this period was trying to do more interference, and they were changing up the whole company style a bit. And I don't mind interference in matches. I don't even mind interference when it leads to a finish. Sometimes I do, but a lot of times I don't. But what I hate with Ring of Honor interference usually is they don't do it elegantly. Like so many times, including in this match and in the Alex Shelley interference earlier, they make like little to no effort to like hide it from the ref. Like the ref literally, I think at the end sees Julius Smokes like grabbing Mark Briscoe as he's on the top rope, which directly leads to like the end of the match. And it's one of those things again where it's and I think Gabe, when he sees this on commentary, actually literally shouts DQ him. And it's just like, you're making the refs look so bad. Like, you can have all the interference you want, but you have to actually like protect the refs, so to speak. Like, going back to that earlier match, I guess one thing we didn't mention, I think, with the tag match, the Generation X tag match, is there's a finish and the ref says like, oh, it's like, I think Walters or whatever, like one of the two baby faces has like the pin or the submission, and the ref is like, you're not the legal man, so I'm not counting it. And it's one of those things again where, because that's ignored 99% of the time in Ring of Honor, it makes you kind of angry because you're like, why are you paying attention to this now? And I just feel like there's so many things in these matches that involve the refs where you could get away with it and it wouldn't be annoying if you just took a little more time to like distract the ref or be consistent. And on this show, it seems to come up a lot where I just noticed myself getting annoyed with it in a way I wasn't maybe in the past.
Yeah, and also it goes to a lot of like something that's been an issue with ROH for a while, which is like, what does it want to be? Is it like pure straight wrestling that they follow the rules strictly or not? Like, if a guy pulls out a chair in a lot of matches, like, they are allowed to use the chair basically, right? They don't get into any trouble for using chairs and weapons and stuff in regular matches. And that's true in ROH for years. And it's like, okay, but like they never address why that's okay. Or, it's like, is this ECW? What is this? Are there rules? I don't know. And yes, you're right. Same thing with interference. Another thing I wanted to add also, they mentioned again that low-key promo that was redacted. And Gabe is like, yeah, he says, like, it's a disgusting promo. We had to edit it out. He says something about how respect isn't given, it's earned or taught. And I'm like, yeah, man, that sounds vile. It's a good thing they got rid of that. I don't think I'd be able to handle that one.
Yeah, I love that too. Like, that's the worst part of it he can hint. Like, he says, got to earn respect. So after the match, the Rottweilers enter the ring and they hold up Mark. Key gets on the mic and says, respect is either earned or taught. So I'm surprised Gabe didn't edit this out. That's horrible to hear. And he says, Mark damn well did not earn my respect tonight. And he gives him one super hard slap to the face. And yeah, and like you mentioned earlier, it is kind of weird to see that Jay doesn't come out for this.
It really bothered me, especially when I realized later on he comes out to save Samoa Joe, and like his brother's just getting the shit kicked out of him, and they don't have any explanation for why Jay doesn't make the save here. Like, he's not at the building yet, he's getting iced up, like whatever, like doesn't know about, like what the hell? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Why would he not come out?
See, I was kind of explaining it away in my head watching this, knowing the match order, going, well, Jay Briscoe wrestles the next match, so he's probably in the back getting ready and warming up so he can't help his brother. But then I think the next match, I think on commentary they even mentioned like this is the first match back from intermission. So it's like, well, if there was an intermission between these matches, like, yeah, why doesn't Jay help his brother? When he probably had 20 minutes between matches. And yeah, that definitely that's one thing I would not have mentioned on commentary then, that Jay had whole of intermission where he could have gotten ready and still helped his brother. But that actually brings us to the next match. Homicide defeats Jay Briscoe in 11 minutes, 23 seconds via pinfall after he hits a lariat. Matt, you didn't like that Jay did not help his brother. Awful brother behavior. How did he redeem himself in this match?
I mean, there was another part, like, I thought that after all that happened, Jay would, like, come out and, like, just, like, run in and attack Homicide before the bell, but instead the opposite happens. Homicide threw the towel at Jay and then jumped him before the bell. So I did feel like there was a little bit of psychological malpractice here going on. Like, Jay should have been involved in the previous finish. He should have been furious at the beginning of this. It didn't really happen, but Jay did get a lot of offense early, did a top rope drop kick. I thought that was good. Homicide came back. They did a big struggle on the top rope where Jay was hit a big belly-to-belly overhead throw, and both were down. They were trading shots mid-ring. Jay did this really great-looking Splash Mountain powerbomb. I don't know if you remember that. Like, one of the best that I've seen in a while for two. Homicide slammed Jay's head first into the turnbuckle and did a pile driver. It was funny to hear Key on the outside Excuse me, I sneezed. It was funny to hear Key on the outside cheering for Homicide because you don't usually hear that from Low Key. Just like, yeah, come on, let's go, you can do it. And like Homicide, and then Homicide goes cop killer, and Loki goes definitely, which I don't know. I just thought that was so funny. He just yells definitely.
That was also something I loved, where it was goes back to WrestleMania, where Paul Heyman was at ringside and you could hear everything he said because there was no crowd, and he was like, after Brock hit the F5, he was like, keep hitting him with F5s, and I just love when like wrestlers advice to the wrestlers in the ring are like, hit your finisher. Like, wow, no one could think of that.
There was a really funny thing when I was a kid. I was on a little league team, and this was like the shitty little league, like for all the kids that weren't actually any good at sports, just a bunch of dorks. And so like my dad was actually a pretty good athlete. I wasn't. And so he would be there, and like this other guy who was the manager, quote unquote, of the team, and he would like just like do this whole like manager like almost like cosplay, almost like where he would like have to really feel like a manager. So like the kid on the mound would be pitching, he would stop to go in and give advice, and I was in the outfield like hiding, but my dad would be right there, so he would tell me like whenever he came in to like give him advice, he would just be like, let's go. Like, come on, let's get him. Like that would be all he said, and that's sort of what that reminds me of. Just like saying the most obvious, pointless things to somebody to cheer them on. Like Loki going definitely, but Jay escaped the cop killer, and then Homicide escaped the Jade Driller, and Homicide hit a power bomb. Then they traded Yakuza kicks because of course they did. And Jay knocked down Homicide. So Homicide came back with a lariat. Jay kicked out. Meanwhile, Homicide is distracted by the fans. And so Jay drops him on his head with a suplex. And Jay goes up to the top, and Smokes grabs his leg, and Homicide double suplexes him. So Homicide then lariats him for the win. I actually like this match more than Loki versus Mark because I just thought it had more action. I don't think it was maybe quite as dramatic, but I just thought it had more energy. And I thought I could use some energy after that previous match. I was still annoyed psychologically that Jay wasn't a little bit more furious and wrestling with a little more anger. And then they beat down Jay after the match. Well, you could talk about that in a second. But he told that he doesn't deserve respect. That was the main thing. And Mark doesn't come out to save Jay either, but at least you can make the excuse that Mark was just beaten up. So he has an excuse.
Yeah, this was another match. It goes hand in hand with the last one. And in a way, I prefer the Aries-Williams match to both these Briscoe singles matches, but I think all three are they're all decently good. Like they're all like 3.25 star matches or somewhere in that range. To me, somewhere in that range, but like you would look on paper and expect more from all of those. And I feel like it's going to sound like I'm being harder on these matches than something like Collier Romero, when I think that match is probably at the same level as these matches. But I think the difference is that there are some undercard matches where it feels like they're meant to be kind of like good but not great, and there are some matches where the guys are so good or they're in a spot later in the card where you feel like that could have been great or should have been great and it was only good. And even though it can be the same like level of quality, the former matches, the matches like Collier and Romero, feel better because of that, because you don't leave with that disappointment.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, it's all about expectations.
Exactly. And I thought this match, it had a fun opening, I thought, where they were kind of fast-paced at the opening, and then it kind of slowed down a bit, and that was more of this disappointing, and then it picked up again at the end, but it was good, but not great. And I want to make clear, I made a mistake with the last match. This was the match that had Gabe shouting DQ him when the Julius Smokes interfered in full view of the ref. And I completely agree with you. I made a note of this as well, that Jay Briscoe is completely emotionless here. For when you consider everything that he's gone through in this feud, where, you know, he's wrestled Homicide before recently, and just 2 shows earlier, Homicide threw a fireball that hit his brother in the face, and, you know, Mark had to be taken to the back. And here, you know, Jay wrestles with zero emotion at all. Like he wrestles this like this would be any other match of his life. and that is disappointing. Where I feel like even Mark against Low Key showed a little more emotion. So even if this match had a bit more action, that definitely kind of threw me off here on this one. One thing I really did like was Homicide hits 2 lariats in this match. And on the first one, Jay like lands right on his head and neck to the point where it actually looks kind of dangerous. And then he just sells like a dead fish afterwards. And it just is, it's a crazy bump and a great sell of the lariat. Made it look like $1,000,000. So I really thought that was cool. But and the other thing that that kind of bugged me, again, it's kind of a theme for the night. It's Mark Nolte again during these matches. He talks about like why are all these stables allowed to interfere in matches? And Gabe is even like, maybe we'll have to look into that. And it's one of those things where when you point it out and it keeps happening, because I don't think this is the first time he's pointed it out, it makes the company look dumb, because you start thinking, if guys are going to keep interfering match after match, it makes the company look dumb for not changing the rules. It makes the baby faces look dumb for not wising up and bringing back up to their matches with them. Like, at least Collier and Walters brought Ricky Steamboat to the ring. It just, they're doing the same trick over and over, and you're having an announcer pointing out, this is kind of stupid. And it's kind of a theme for the night. But all told, this match was still worth it, because the highlight for me was at one point when Jay climbs the buckles to grab Homicide, who's on the top rope. You just hear Julius Smokes very clearly go, "Oh, Jesus." And it was just a real funny moment from Julius Smokes.
The outside the ring commentary from the Rottweilers was very pleasing the entire match.
Yeah, I don't care what Gabe says. I think Julius Smokes is still a cool dude. He's a cool guy.
He is a real cool guy.
Cool. So after that, that brings us to what happened after the match. Yeah, after the match, Julius Smokes gets on the mic and he says, "Things I can't make out," I wrote, as Homicide slaps Jay. Low Key then says, "Rottweilers 2, Briscoe Brothers 0. And Matt, I didn't realize this. It kind of snuck up on us. This is the second last show we're going to see the Briscoes in Ring of Honor for quite some time. They have I believe on the next show, a tag match against Key and Homicide, and I think that's it for quite a while for them.
By our pace, it's the last time we're going to see the Briscoe brothers in the next 35 years.
It's the next show will be the last time when we're not collecting Social Security that we'll be watching a Briscoes match in Ring of Honor.
That's right.
What we got to watch next was the Ring of Honor World Title match. Samoa Joe successfully defended the title. He defeats Colt Cabana via pinfall in 17 minutes, 29 seconds after he hits the Muscle Buster. And yet can't believe I'm saying this. This is it's going to shock everyone. Another like 3.5, 3 3/4 star match even for me. I actually like this match quite a bit though, because it was different than a lot of recent Samoa Joe matches, where, especially with the Homicide matches, it's kind of portrayed as these, Joe always comes off as dominant, but it's like two guys just throwing bombs at each other, working really hard, like doing big moves, like mano a mano. And what I like about this match is they don't wrestle it like Colt Cabana is on Joe's level. Like, they wrestle it kind of like how their characters and pushes are at this point, which is Colt's this, it's not a blood feud. Joe isn't angry at him, and Colt is going to get dominated, except for he's good at counters, and he has these roll-ups that he could win with a roll-up. And so he's just kind of trying to survive until he can get a roll-up that gets him the win, and which is how he pinned Joe at Survival of the Fittest. And so a lot of this match is wrestled at kind of a slower pace, but I feel like it's a pace that makes sense, because unlike some of the other matches that just were having a slower pace, I felt like just to have a slower pace, I felt like this match was having a slower pace because that was the story. Like, Joe would beat up Colt in an exchange, get the better of him, and Colt would sell, and Joe would just kind of let him get up. And then they'd have another exchange like that. And then occasionally Colt would counter and get control for, 30 seconds, or he'd get a roll up. And I thought, because it actually played into a story, I really enjoyed that. And I also liked that, they kind of worked it like Colt, like Colt had done his homework. I think even Nolte mentions, or either Nolte or Gabe mentions that on commentary, like at one point, Joe has him for the Olay kick, but Colt grabs a different chair at ringside and blocks Joe from hitting the Olay kick, and then he actually hits the Olay kick on Joe, and then later in the match, um, he actually does a common Samoa Joe move where after a kick out, he immediately transitions into the STF, which is, something Joe does all the time. So I like touches like that. And yeah, and I did like that they played this like a face versus face match, which is what it was, where uh Joe in the matches with Homicide, he does wrestle more intensely and like he really wants to kill this guy. Jay Briscoe could take a couple notes. And in this match, he does wrestle it like he doesn't have a grudge against this guy. It's a little bit more laid back while still being Samoa Joe. And then after the match, he gets down on one knee and reaches out and shakes Colt's hand. He initiates it, and then they hug each other. Like, it was kind of refreshing on a night with so many heel interference finishes to just see a match of like two baby faces have a wrestling match. They hug at the end. They had a good competition. I like that a lot. But what did you think about the match?
I thought it was about as good as you said. I was maybe a little disappointed in the sense of like, I think they maybe went too far into the Cabana doesn't really have a chance aspect of it. Like obviously he didn't have a chance, but I think he was presented as a little bit more of a serious threat than you would think from watching this match previously. It really was, they tried to sell at the beginning that Joe was like kind of worn down because he had that brutal match with Homicide the night before, but he really did dominate the match. Like there were certain points where Colt kind of felt like a pushover. And like you said, he did the quick roll-ups and stuff. He got some big moves. He reversed the Ole kick, and then Nolte was like, I've never seen anyone counter the Ole kick. And I was just like, dude, I'm almost positive you've seen it in matches that you've called over the past couple months. Like, it's happened like a million times. Am I wrong? Hasn't that happened a lot even already?
Like, I couldn't pick out like in my memory, but I was pretty sure like probably within the first 5 Olay kicks, someone did a reversal of it.
Yeah, and like I mean, this is just it's a very common spot, or reversing, escaping, drop toe hold, something. You know what I mean? But Colt did do some cool moves. The back suplex where he dropped him on his head. They teased him trying to go for a body slam earlier, and I did enjoy that. Like that he was trying to like treat him like a giant, and then he eventually gets him up, and it's a pretty crappy body slam. And then later in the match, he hits a much closer to normal body slam, but still not that good. But no, I mean, mostly, there were these quick reversals, and then Joe would just hit a big move, a big clothesline, whatever, and knock him out. Was this one of the first matches? Because I think he maybe beat, did he beat Reyes with it? I forget. But he beat him with a regular, like, on the floor muscle buster, as opposed to a top rope muscle buster. He has not done that too many times so far, right?
Yeah, because he's only won a few, like 2 or 3 times, I think, with the muscle buster so far.
Two of them were off the top rope. Yeah.
Yeah, the Homicide one where he debuted it in Ring of Honor, and was it the Jay Briscoe one?
Yeah.
In the cage where he hits. Yeah. So
I feel like there might have been one other match, but I can't say for sure. So this was either the first or second time he hit he won with the regular, just on the canvas muscle buster. But yeah, I thought it was good. I just thought no one believed Cabana had a chance, and I don't think the match did much to change anyone's minds.
Yeah, I can definitely see that viewpoint. Like, again, I just thought this one actually had a bit of a storyline reason, but I also agree. I should have brought up, like, yeah, Colt Cabana hit a couple really ugly looking, some of the uglier body slams you'll ever see. And I guess it kind of works because, like you said, he's trying to sell that Joe's a big, heavy guy, but I don't think that was all Colt selling. Like, some of those were pretty ugly, but
yeah.
But it was cool also to see Colt get such a, like, I guess we should mention, Colt got like a really huge hometown reaction. This wasn't the first time Ring of Honor had streamers, but this match and the next match are the first time, like one of the instances where I think streamers are going to start becoming a much more regular thing in the company, where both this match and the next match get quite a few streamers, especially the next match.
Well, Joe got the streamers, right? And then Colt picked up a streamer and threw it for himself and said, Colt Cabana, yay!
Yeah, that was funny too.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it was cool. Like this was arguably, the biggest match in Colt's career up to this point. I guess you could say his opening Ring of Honor match was big because he was trying to get a place in the company, but to get
And the tag title main event from Reborn Stage 2, I think, was probably up there as well.
yeah, those would probably be the three. So this was a big match, and yeah, Joe did take a lot of it, but I thought it made sense. So after the match, the Rottweilers hit the ring and they start attacking Joe until the Briscoes run in with chairs and chase them off. So let it be clear, the Briscoes care more about Samoa Joe than they do about each other. Joe gets back up. He stares down the Rottweilers from inside the ring. He holds up the Ring of Honor title. Joe gets down on one knee and shakes Colt Cabana's hand, like I said before. The two hug, the crowd chants ROH. And that reminds me, one other thing I missed was, did you know, well, you obviously noticed, but we didn't mention, Colt's doing this entrance for this match. He's getting this big reaction from the crowd. And he's got the tag title, the Ring of Honor tag title around his waist. And then he jumps on the apron and the title just falls on the floor off his waist. And he just kind of sells it and looks down and the crowd laughs. And I think some people chant, "You fucked up." But that was the kind of thing where it was obviously like a legit mistake, but if anyone can get away with it with their character, it's Colt Cabana. That
Right.
even in like his greatest moment, he's, having this big goof. But we have this cut to minutes later where clearly a few minutes have passed, but we're still in the building, in the ring, because there's no backstage segments. And Allison Danger is walking to the ring in a neck brace, interrupting Dave Prazak's ring introduction for the main event. And no, the wrestlers are out for the main event, but Prazak was letting the crowd know what it was going to be. The crowd chants, "You got fucked up," at Allison Danger, so they're clearly very sympathetic towards her. Danger gets in the ring with a mic, and she says she made Moff and Whitmer who they are today. She mentions the homicide crippled her the night before, which gets a large pop from the crowd. And then Danger says she blames Moff and Whitmer for homicide, giving her the cop killer, which was a little projection there. But she says they're the reason she was in the hospital last night. That gets a loud cheer, and the crowd does a very loud "shut the fuck up" chant at her.
This seemed to be an extremely all-male crowd, too. Like, I was looking, I didn't even see a hint of woman in that audience.
Yeah, Danger calls tonight the final match in her relentless feud with the Second City Saints. People she says she hates almost as much as she hates Moff and Whitmer. Danger says tonight will be the end, and she wants all four men to be taken out. Then she asks the staff of Ring of Honor to bring her weapons of destruction to ringside. And all of a sudden, we get Ring of Honor staff bringing out a barbed wire board, a barbed wire 2x4, just various things like that.
Where does she get the power to dictate this?
Yeah, I have no idea. The crowd loves seeing the weapons. And Allison walks to the back of the building. She grabs a chair to sit down, and the ring intro starts. So that's an interesting little touch they try and make where, you could have just had those weapons brought out and everyone would just, of course, their weapons are brought out because the next match is a unsanctioned street fight. But it was kind of a neat little way to add story to the idea of the reason some of those weapons are out there is because Allison Danger hates both these teams and just wants them to kill each other. So, but yeah, it was kind of funny to see her like literally order Ring of Honor staff, like, bring out the barbed wire board, and here it comes. But that brings us, Matt, to the main event for the show, an unsanctioned Chicago street fight. The Second City Saints of Ace Steel and CM Punk defeat BJ Whitmer and Dan Moff in 27 minutes, 42 seconds, when Steel pins Whitmer after he hits a tombstone pile driver off the turnbuckles through a table. Matt, this was, I think commentary said this was the most violent match in Ring of Honor history. I don't know if I'd put it above one of the Homicide Carino matches, but I might. I'm not sure. But it has to be at the very worst, like top two, right?
Yeah. You have to accept when you're watching a match like this from this era that there are going to be lots of chair shots to the head, and those seem really bad now. They have for a long time, but especially if you just watch the Chris Benoit documentary, they seem really bad. So if you can get past that, I think this match really delivered what it advertised. I don't think they held anything back. I don't think there's really anything that I can really say like, oh, they should have done this instead. The one negative thing I could say is that maybe this was artificially stretched out, the match, in the sense that, since Moff and Whitmer were the heels now, they were doing a lot of stalling, right? Beginning to go in the ring, lingering on the outside, teasing, leaving, all this stuff. and the Saints try to attack every time it looks like they're getting into the ring again. And then finally, Moff and Whitmer attack when Punk comes outside, and then the match is on. And the Saints get a little bit of shine back in the ring. They double team Moff and Whitmer. Punk does a dive from the top to the outside. Ace goes for a tope, but BJ catches him with a chair to the head, so that's our first chair shot to the head. And there'll be many, many more. They hit Punk in the head right after that, and Punk and Ace are just like bleeding right away. Punk's blade job is good, but it's not one of his best. You know, we've mentioned a lot of times he does such good blade jobs. This was a good blade job, but it's not like epic Punk blade job. But they do, like, Moff and Whitmer do whipping with belts. The Saints get the belts, and they whip and clothesline each other with the belt. Moff goes headfirst into the guardrail. So, you know, and that's a pretty brutal headshot as well. There's a funny spot where Ace holds Moff in the aisle so Punk can, like, run through the crowd and jump over the guardrail and dive on him. And BJ almost messes it up. Like, BJ walks over and starts hitting him, and like, kind of like, I guess Ace must whisper to him what's going on. So BJ just kind of, like, wanders away. Like, this is real. Like, there's no real explanation for why BJ stops attacking him other than he knows that he needs to get out of the way of the spot. But Punk basically, like, runs from the crowd over the guardrail onto Moff in the aisleway, who's being held up by Ace, is basically what happens. So Gabe calls Whitmer's blade job too early, which I thought was funny. He's like, BJ is bleeding. Oh, no, sorry, Whitmer is not bleeding, or he's not busted open yet, he says. Punk holds a chair to Moff's face in the corner, and Ace drop kicks it into him. Then they sandwich Moff's head in the ladder, and Ace hits the chair into it. God, how many concussions must have been given in this match? Punk hits the running corner boot while the crowd chants "kill him," which is something, and Moff is bleeding now. So they put BJ's neck against the turnbuckle, and then they put a table up to his throat, so basically his head is like guillotined above the table. Then they put a ladder on top of the table and slide it into BJ's head. I just wrote, geez. And now BJ is bleeding. So Punk attacks both of them with the barbed wire 2x4. Punk goes to hit Moff with the 2x4, but Moff low blows him, and then BJ gets the 2x4 and does a Russian leg sweep with the 2x4, which is, I don't know, I just think that's funny. What am I going to do with this brutal barbed wire board? Let me hit a side Russian leg sweep. Moff hits Punk in the crotch with the barbed wire 2x4. Now that's how you use a barbed wire 2x4, I think. So Moff now gets a barbed wire board, like a board that you lay on the ground with barbed wire. And Punk and BJT suplexing each other onto the board, but no one does. Then Punk goes for a swinging DDT onto the barbed wire, but Whitmer releases him, and so Punk just kind of plants face first onto the board. Then Ace goes to suplex BJ onto it, but Moff throws it out of the way and props it up in the corner. And then they do a lot of teases where they're going to throw each other into it in the corner until Moff hits his rolling cannonball on Punk into it. So they both kind of go into it. Then Ace takes like the remnants of the board, props that up, and whips Moff into it. So now it breaks twice. And Nolte's like, I don't know if you've ever been tangled up in barbed wire, Jimmy, but it actually does more damage getting the barbed wire off of you. So my thought was just, so Nolte's been tangled up in barbed wire? Like, that's the only conclusion I can draw.
Well, maybe he was my dad was tangled up in barbed wire. He always told me stories like, I think he was like running or something like as a farm boy and like tripped and fell into a barbed wire fence. And I don't know if he did not tell me the lesson of it hurt more coming out. I think he was more focused on just it hurt, period. Because, like, all right, even that knowledge, like, what are you supposed to do with that knowledge? Like, he should have just left it in for the rest of his life.
Yeah. You're just barbed wire, man, because I can't deal with the pain of taking it out. But, yeah, maybe that happened. Maybe the same exact thing happened to Mark Nolte that happened to your dad. So at this point, the crowd is standing. Like, this has been a lot of, like, action that has really captivated the crowd. The crowd is very into this. I'll be honest, I was very into it, too. So we're about 20 minutes in, and Ace does the first pinfall attempt after a sit-down powerbomb. There's, like, a chair standoff, and the teams, like, they let each other hit each other in the head with it. This is probably the most problematic spot of the entire match. They just stand there and get hit in the head with chairs. And there's a big ROH chant. They basically trade Like the Saints hit the Prophecy with chairs, the Prophecy hit the Saint with chairs, all in the head, and they just stand there and take it, no coverage or anything. So then they Moff and Whitmer go out to get more chairs and throw them into the ring. So the whole crowd throws chairs in the ring. So the referee is kind of like ducking in the side of the ring, but the ring is just covered in chairs. And Gabe's like, "We have a riot in Chicago," and I was just thinking, this is not what a riot is. Even that first ROH riot wasn't really a riot, but at least that was like riot-esque.
Yeah.
This is people standing behind a guardrail. But the teams, they go on and they fight on top of the chairs. And Moff half Nelson's suplexes Punk on the chairs. And then, without selling really, Punk pops off and German suplexes Moff on them. And Gabe goes, "These men have no regard for their well-being." And I just wrote, nope, they definitely don't. Moff sets up the ladder in the aisleway. And he sets up the aisle like the ladder like across the guardrails in the aisleway and puts Ace on it. And BJ goes up to dive, but Punk pulls him off onto the chairs. And then Ace pulls Moff off and puts him on the ladder. And so Punk does a dive from the top rope onto Moff, onto a ladder in the aisle. I thought that was another pretty scary spot. Then Ace again hits BJ in the head with a chair. BJ goes for a top rope exploder, but Ace fights off and tombstones him through the table and gets the pin. I guess if you are really, really a stickler for selling moves like dramatically for a long period of time, you will not like this. But if you just expect this is a brawl, they're going to hit every big move they can think of. They're going to escalate the violence. It's going to get more and more intense. They're going to end at pretty much the right time. This was a great match, and this is still one of the most memorable brawls in ROH history. I think it was the most memorable match of a weekend with a lot of good matches. I was very impressed with the job they did on this.
I agree. I thought this was a great match. I feel like this was a show where you have a lot of really talented wrestlers kind of having good matches, but not doing everything they're capable of. This was the one match on the show where it felt like these guys were giving like a 110% over and above the Call of Duty performance, just in terms of how long they went, how much physical punishment they were willing to take, how many ideas they seemed to have in this match. And I feel like hardcore matches, brawls, they can fail in a lot of ways, but the two ways most common these matches aren't good. They're usually the two most common reasons why are these. The first one would be, I've seen a lot of these matches. We've even seen them in the Undercard and Ring of Honor of like brawls where it's clear they have one or two gimmick spots at the end, and the rest of the match is just them punching and bleeding at ringside, and they have no other ideas. So it's just like they're killing time. And then the other way these matches can fail is it's almost like the opposite, where it's clear they've come up with 30 different gimmick spot ideas, but there's no match kind of in between them. It's just like, okay, we plan to hit you with this. Now we're going to hit you with this. And I've called this before, like kind of like the Carrot Top prop comedy of wrestling matches, where it's literally feels less like a match and more like, look at these 18 things we got from the dollar store that we're going to hit each other. And as soon as we're done with these, the match is over. And I feel like one of the things that makes this match great is it finds the middle ground between those two things. It doesn't fall into either hole. Like the whole match, it felt watching this match, it definitely felt like these guys came up with a lot of these spots had to have been things they thought of before the match and all the plans and all the weapons. So it felt like they had put a lot of consideration in it, but yet there was enough space between each of the big weapon spots and where it was just some brawling that was fairly entertaining or some selling, where it never felt like a wrestling match that had a lot of weapon spots. It didn't just feel like a weird exhibition. Like it still felt like a brawl, like they hated each other. So I felt like they had a good middle ground where it felt like every minute or two you got some new weapon spot being introduced. Like, all right, here's the belts, or here's the barbed wire board, here's the 2x4, here's the chairs, here's the tables, here's the ladder. But they kept them coming every 2 or 3 minutes, which I liked, where it wasn't just every 2 seconds. And so you could have made this match shorter, but I think then you would have been forced to condense it down. It would have felt more artificial. And I actually feel like for a match that was almost 28 minutes long, there was only a couple times where I felt even a hint of maybe this is dragging just for a little bit. But for the most part, for a 28-minute brawl like this, to be like that, like I feel like that's a huge achievement in itself. Yeah, you ran it down really well. Just pretty much every weapon you could spot you would want to see is in this match. They checked them all off, and everyone put in a great effort. I did feel like Punk had to fly 2 or 3 times, and Punk, God bless him, every time he tries to fly or do any move that involves him jumping or anything, like he is the lead balloon of wrestlers in terms of jumping. He always just falls like straight down. Like if Pac, when he first worked on the indies, they always said he was the guy that gravity forgot. I probably used this line before, but CM Punk is the guy that gravity remembered. He just always has zero hang time.
But hey, that made that landing on that ladder even more of a thud.
Yeah, he jumps and he just falls straight onto it. And I think like one of the live reports that was sent to the Observer or something said CM Punk hit a frog splash on the ladder. And I was like, that was not that was maybe not even a tadpole splash. That was CM Punk jumping and barely making it and just landing chest first on the guy. But it made it in some ways more impressive. One thing I think I was struck by watching this match, and you touched on it, was it is crazy how we knew concussions were a bad thing in 2004. Let's not kid ourselves. But it is crazy. Like, I don't think anyone would be allowed to get away with what they did in this match in 2020, which is only 16 years later. But like you said,
partially because they were just so close to each other. You know what I mean? They were standing near each other and stuff. They would not be allowed to get away with that in 2020.
There was not any frequent scrubbing down of the surfaces of this match every 5 minutes, which I presume is coming to real wrestling in the next couple of months. But no, like that sequence you described, it is basically, there's a sequence in this match that is basically a New Japan fighting spirit. We're all going to dare each other to hit each other as hard as we can, and we're not going to fight back, except it's with chair shots to the head.
It's Mike Awesome, Masato Tanaka, basically.
Yeah, and it is...
But times 2, because there's 4 guys.
Even if there were a few wrestlers in wrestling these days that would still attempt that, there would be if any prominent promotion did what they did in this match, there would be a week-long online discourse about should this have been done? They should never allow this to happen.
Should this company be shut down by the government? Right? That's what they would be saying.
I'm not even saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying,
no, not at all.
16 years ago, you did this, and I don't remember there being any outcry. It was just
no, I'm sure people were that's not cool, but I don't think anyone was losing sleep over it, except possibly these guys because of their concussions.
Or maybe they got extra sleep, the wrong kind of sleep. But and then the chair throwing spot, and I felt so bad for the poor referee. And also, you have to remember, because the referee during this, as the chairs are being thrown, he's still in the ring. Everyone else is at ringside, and he's just ducking and covering his head. And I have to remember the poor cameramen, because they have to stay focused on the ring, and so their back is turned to the chairs. And it would just take just one person who doesn't do a good job of throwing their chair to really ruin somebody's night. And I always feel bad in spots like that for the staff. But yeah, this is the one great match on the show. And even though I think the show had really good wrestling up and down, it needed something that was truly felt special and memorable. I think this is the one match that gives it that. It ends a feud. And I guess the one last thing I would say to describe this match is, I think if you don't like these hardcore weapons brawls match, this is not a match that will convert you to liking it. But if you have any sort of taste for these kinds of matches at all, I think you'll really love this match.
Yeah, and I think if you can put the chair shots out of your head, because you know what, they happened, it sucks, but that's the way wrestling was back then. I would probably, since we're doing more star ratings these days, I'd probably go 4.5 for this match. I thought this was really one of the better brawls in ROH history.
I agree. I think that's would probably be my rating too. And it's a really interesting feather in CM Punk's cap, because I don't know if some people, I think if you were just a WWE fan of him, you might not realize he has a match like this in his resume, where he's taking full force I mean, full unprotected chair shots to the head and doing. I mean, credit to him. He and Moff were the guys doing the majority of, I think, all of the barbed wire spots in this match. Punk was really, even though he was the biggest name in this match, even at this point in his career, he was game for everything. He was doing just as much, if not more, as everyone else here.
Absolutely.
And
I wouldn't even say he was necessarily the standout performer. I mean, he was great, but I thought they were all really good. In some ways, Moff might have been the standout performer, honestly.
Yeah, I think everyone looked great. And in some weird ways, like one of the most prominent, this has to be one of the most prominent matches Ace Steel ever had in Ring of Honor. I mean, he's winning a giant main event and he gets the pinfall. That's the other thing that was a little weird. Like Ace Steel's been in Ring of Honor before this, but it was kind of interesting where at the end of this huge feud, this crazy war of a gimmick match, it's Ace Steel getting the win, like not Colt, not Punk, it's Ace Steel.
I think they had a lot of faith in Ace in big brawls. I mean, if you remember, he was in the Cage of Death too, and he was even less involved in ROH at that point than he was here. So, like, they get him involved for certain things that I guess they have a lot of faith in him with.
Yeah, and he did good too. He fit right in with everyone else, and so yeah, great match. And then shortly after the match ends, Generation Next hits the ring and attacks the Saints. Colt eventually runs in to try and make the save, but he gets beaten down as well. Then the crowd chants for Ricky Steamboat, and Ricky quickly answers their chants. He runs out very shortly after that. He gets beaten down too by Generation Next, who proceeds to then tape Steamboat by the arms to the ropes.
Gen Next look like such a bunch of frat boys in this segment. The way they're dressed, like their sneakers, like they just look like a frat. Like they just entered the ring to beat up these wrestlers.
And 3 of the 4 of them did you notice, were wearing disposable white gloves. And Gabe even calls out, like, why are they wearing white gloves?
They were ahead of their time when it came to handling blood.
Exactly, but yet, like, Gabe asked that on commentary, and you never get an answer. I presume it was because they didn't want to deal with blood, but it was weird because Roderick Strong was the only guy he wasn't wearing them. Some of them were only wearing, I think, 1 glove, but I have to think that's why they were scared of blood. But they tape, so like I said, they tape Steamboat to the ring ropes by the arms. I do wish they would have found a better position to tape Steamboat by, because basically they tape Steamboat to the ropes where he's standing up and his arms are outstretched, so basically like a crucifix pose. And so for the extended beatdown that follows, it basically looks like Ricky Steamboat is just lounging and relaxing and watching all these guys he likes getting the crap beat out of him. Like, I would have tried to find just, I don't know, a better position to put his arms. It's kind of a weird visual.
Didn't they say that's kind of why Andre the Giant used to get his arms tied up in the ropes so he could rest for a little while?
It's a very comfortable looking,
yeah,
forced witnessing of a beatdown.
Yeah.
Shelley gets on the mic and he says Steamboat has a front row seat to the demise of the Second City Saints. Shelley says the Saints' time has come and gone, and Generation Next is the future. They keep beating down the Saints. Different Saints keep making little comeback attempts, but they always only last a few seconds before Gen Next overwhelms them. Let me just see there. Generation Next eventually gets tired of beating everyone down, and they start to leave as a loud "You suck dick" chant starts in the crowd. And I love this, man. The very last thing on this show that we see and hear is we hear a fan in the crowd telling Alex Shelley to go back to TNA and kiss Jeff Jarrett's ass, and Shelley just calmly says, "Will do," and we immediately cut to black. That's the way the show ends, like perfect timing. Just Shelley, like, okay, and end of show.
So Shelley was great.
Yeah. So that is the end of Death Before Dishonor 2, Part 2, the Double Deuce. Matt, what did you think about the show as a whole?
I thought it was a good show. I think there were some matches that disappointed me more than they disappointed you, but I generally agree about the consistency of quality. And this this show had the match of the weekend by far, I thought, in the main event. That said, I probably liked top to bottom, had more matches that jazzed me up in night 1 a little bit more. So I probably liked night 1 a little bit more top to bottom, but I don't think you can go wrong with this weekend. It's super solid, and this show had just a fantastic, memorable, legendary Ring of Honor brawl. So good, definitely a thumbs up show.
I agree that some matches on this show were disappointing. I actually think I would put this as the best night of the double shot, even though both nights were really good, because even though some of the matches were disappointing, I just think this is one of the most consistent cards Ring of Honor has put up top to bottom to this point in their history. Like everything is good, and then you got the one great match to top it off. And even though some of the good matches on paper you would expect them to be great, I just think this is the card where it really shows off how far Ring of Honor has come in terms of their depth. Like,
And a lot
I
of people
think
weren't even on this show, right? Like no Embassy, no Special K, no Carnage Crew people.
no
So
Danielson.
yeah, no American Dragon. I mean, maybe you could argue that besides Danielson, a lot of like the fat was trimmed off of this lineup of people. Um, but still, like the point is like as good as this roster was, they still have some more tricks up their sleeve. Nigel McGuinness wasn't
Yeah.
on this show, so like it shows you're right. There's a lot of depth in this roster.
And I think it's interesting because in 2002, 2003, obviously there's a lot of stuff we liked, but I think one thing we kind of agreed on going back is we felt like almost with an exception here or there, almost all of the major main events and the great matches people remember from Ring of Honor are still great 15, 16 years later. But the things that didn't hold up as well is a lot of the undercards people thought were great. That kind of doesn't hold up. And if there's been a problem with Ring of Honor, looking back, it was their depth. And I feel like this is the time on this show where I was just like, they've got so many great guys at this point. Like, it's just an embarrassment of riches. Like, that they could just, the first 6 months of Ring of Honor was carried by Low Key and Danielson and Daniels. And now Low Key is just can be in a throwaway match in the middle of the card. Like that's how much depth they have. Doug Williams is a special attraction, but he's just in one of a whole bunch of matches. Even though he's got a title, it's fairly early in the card. It's just they've got such depth at this point. It's crazy. This is really mid 2004, especially, and it's really impressive when going back, we did the Feinstein episode and stuff, and so many of the newsletters were saying like the big problem with Ring of Honor without AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels is I don't know how they're going to deal with the depth, and it's like their depth a few months later is stronger than literally it had ever been.
Well, they took a gamble on Generation Next, and it was a huge success. It paid off so well. It was one of the best things they ever did. It worked out amazingly well, the whole Generation Next thing. Also, this show, like, really, they trimmed the fat. Like, there was, like I said earlier, like, it's just a very compact show, not a lot of like throwaway bullshit. That said, I don't think that's true forever. Like I know there are shows later in 2004 that are like endless and super long, but this is a show that really shows what the ROH can be when they just make it like short or like not even short, but like just to the point, just the good stuff. You know what I mean? That's kind of what these shows are. It's just the good stuff.
I guess to give one more criticism, which kind of sums up what we've talked about on this show, there was a lot of interference and heel beatdowns, which I don't mind, but there was a lot on one show. Like, it felt like maybe you could have spread this out a bit more to have two heel stables. You ended on a big heel angle. You have multiple interference finishes, like at least two or three. You have just it was quite a bit on for one show, but still, I really enjoyed this show.
Yeah, if this weekend was not a box office success, it was definitely an artistic success altogether.
Definitely. So that brings us to the end of the show, and we have stuff to plug as usual. If you want to contact us, that's ThROH@gmail.com is the email address, THROH. If you want to get to know us on Twitter, at Trevor Dame on Twitter or at Mayor MGF on Twitter. We have a thread on the Pro Wrestling Only message board, which I check sporadically these days. If anyone wants to post there, do give a comment. And we mentioned at the top, well, we're always appearing on podcasts, seems like these days in the pandemic. So there's lots of other stuff to listen to with us talking about wrestling. And next time on the show, we will be covering Testing the Limit, which is known for one big thing. It happened on August 7th, my 20th birthday. Well, okay, two things. It also happened to have a 70-plus minute Austin Aries Bryan Danielson match that was originally planned to go for 3 hours. So that's next on ThROH The Years. Matt, do you have anything else to say?
Wash your hands, social distancing, wear a mask when you go into public places. It's just to protect everyone around you. You know what I mean. Yeah, thanks for listening. I'm glad we're getting to some really good stuff now. Hopefully, we'll be back sooner with the next show too. I can't imagine that the quarantine's ending anytime soon, so I imagine that we will be.
Yeah, so thanks again for everyone listening. Be safe. Like Matt said, those are all great tips. And, until next time, have a good time. Have a great time. Wash your goddamn hands.